So, Pokemon has a problem, a multitude of problems as a matter of fact, but personally I don't think any of those problems can compare with the issue, which is the lack of a national dex. For those who don't know, let me explain because this has been a reoccurring issue throughout the series. Pokemon is a creature collector beloved by many, where you can battle and trade with your friends. Trading is an essential feature in every Pokemon game, and without it you can't really call it one, as every version of every generation requires trading for real completion. In the early 2000s, however, when it was time to move away from the Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance, there was a slight problem. If you spent hundreds of hours collecting Pokemon across the first two generations, they can't be transferred to any entry outside of Game Boy and Nintendo 64. The way Pokemon data was written had been changed moving into the next generation, and the link cable being different were both perpetrators to this enraging issue. So how did they resolve this issue? Well, first of all, you have to keep this in mind. This was a new generation and it was impossible to play the old games and move those on to the next one. So what they did was, in this new generation, they got the old Pokemon from the previous generations, 1 and 2, and they spread them across the region. Or rather, spread them across the generation. But it doesn't sound as simple as it is. You see, Generation 3 takes place in Hoenn. You can only get a specific amount of Pokemon in Hoenn. In order to get the rest of the Pokemon, you had to get this Pokemon Stadium successor, as well as its sequel, and you also had to get remakes of the Generation 1 games, but now on the Game Boy Advance, titled Fire Red and Leaf Green. Not only that, but there was also an enhanced version of Generation 3. You see, back then, you don't really see it commonly now, but before, there used to be games that released in pairs of 2, but afterwards, they would release a special edition that was enhanced and added more content, or fixed some sprites, music, added a little bit of pizzazz. Why did I say pizzazz? All of this took place over the course of 3 years, and I don't know what specific Pokemon appear in which games, since I didn't really grow up with Generation 3, or found it interesting at all until very recently, thanks to the 3DS. And when I mean recently, I mean like a few weeks before the eShop closed, and I didn't get like Alpha Sapphire until like 2 months ago. But one thing I do know is the fact that in order to trade between Generation 3 and the Kanto remakes, you had to beat both games in order to lift the trading restriction. Needless to say, Generation 3 is an expensive game to complete, especially in today's retro gaming market, but with future generations it got a bit easier or better. If you want a more in-depth explanation as to what these issues were in Generation 3 specifically, I recommend this video up here by Tamahiro, I don't know how to pronounce it. Needless to say, it's in the iCard above, and it's also in the description down below. Generation 3 was the first generation to have this issue with transferring or trading Pokemon into future generations, because Generation 1 and 2, that was simple. All you needed was a link cable, and I believe there was like a time travel device or something like that. But all the Generation 1 Pokemon could be traded between the second generation and the first generation. But Generation 3 and onward is a kind of mess. To transfer from Generation 3 to Generation 4, you had to re-catch all your Pokemon in Pal Park, which doesn't unlock until the post-game. So you're pretty much locked out of getting your old Pokemon, and you're stuck playing with new Pokemon, which, you know, in retrospect, you know, for the first time doing this, that's completely fine. That's completely fine. When there comes a new generation, you know, they don't want you to just play with the same old Pokemon. They want you to experience and experiment with new Pokemon and those kinds of, you know, combinations. The problem is they kept doing it every single time. Generation 4 to Generation 5 had you play a tedious minigame to transfer up your Pokemon. And just like Generation 4, you had to get to the post-game to unlock this. Okay, let me correct that for you, okay? In Black 2 and White 2, you had to get to the post-game. In Black 1 and White 1, you had to get every single Unovan Pokemon and unlock the National Dex. I just found that out now. I didn't even know about that when I was writing the script. Wow, okay. Actually, that kind of takes me off a little bit. Not only do you have to get to the post game, but you also have to go through the entire game. Nah. That's actually really dumb. That's not even in the script. Like this is my genuine reaction. Like, oh my gosh, these games have been bad from the beginning. And all the DS games can transfer to the 3DS using an app called Pokemon Transfer, but All these transfers are only one way, sadly. This also applies to the 3DS games. Once the Pokemon moves to Generation 7, it's locked to the Generation 7 games and can't go back to Generation 6. And eventually, Generation 1 and 2 were put on the 3DS and had the ability to go through transfer, and obviously you can replay the game if you wanted to catch them all. But since modding the 3DS is surprisingly easy, what people did was they took their cartridges of the Generation 1 and 2 games and actually swapped the save data and moved it onto the 3DS. I think that's kind of cool, you know. It kind of came full circle even though it took like 20-something years. It took 20-something years, but hey, you got your Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon into the newer generations, and I'm happy for you, whoever you are. Jennifer. Sadly, I could only purchase 2 out of the 6 games on the 3DS before the eShop closed. I was a little bit late to the 3DS party. This is the most brief explanation on the issue, and part of it is growing up and realizing that either catching Pokemon since you were a kid or catching Pokemon now, regardless of when you start or how you start, you'll never really be able to do the one thing the game tells you, and that's catch them all. You needed to be there for the real world events. You needed to be there when the online was active, or just needed a friend. And if you don't have any of those, it's either pay hundreds to thousands of dollars or just flat out cheat. Take for example Deoxys, one of the hardest Pokemon to get your hands on. Let's go and look at the Bulbapedia article and see how to get it in every game. Also, let me clarify something. Deoxys is a mythical Pokemon. You don't need mythical Pokemon to complete the Pokedex, or the National Dex, but, you know, it's either get the Pokemon or have a bunch of blank spots on your Pokedex. You don't need any mythical Pokemon at all, but it's nice to actually have like the whole list complete, you know what I mean? In Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, you can only get it through an event, or trading with a friend. On Pokemon Emerald, you need a Birth Island. No, don't birth an island. You need to go to Birth Island. And to do that, you need an Aurora ticket. And what is an Aurora ticket? An event-exclusive item. Same thing in Fire Red and Leaf Green, Colosseum, and XD, Gale of Darkness, whatever. They require you to trade with someone who already has a Deoxys, and we already know that at that point you needed to be there for an event. Diamond and Pearl, you can only get it in Pal Park. How are you going to get it in Pal Park? Oh, that's right, you had to have had it for the event that took place in Generation 3. Oh, look at that, another event during the era of Diamond and Pearl as well. Obviously that means the event wasn't for me, and you know, I wasn't around for that time, so of course they're gonna re-roll and eventually do another distribution event for people who didn't grow up in that era or became fans further down along the line. Let's see. Generation 5 Wi-Fi event. Skimming through the list now, there's only one way to legitimately obtain this Pokemon and that's getting to Sky Pillar in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and as far as I know, that's like the end of the post game. Generation 8 and 9 are looking really sad. We're gonna go through that later. Again, for Generation 3, you had to be there for the events. Generation 4 is just transferring to Pal Park. Generation 5 is another event you had to be there for, or transfer it up to Pokemon Home. I'm not counting Pokemon Go because you can literally get like anything there. X and Y were trading, and trading to the only Pokemon game where you can catch a Deoxys is part of the main game and not some event, which I had recently bought during my trip to Texas in July. But back to the topic of buying Alpha Sapphire, I was lucky, or rather smart enough to download the events, download the updates to the game onto my 3DS. I didn't know this because I didn't get a 3DS until earlier this year, but the 3DS eShop lets you download updates for games you don't even have. I don't even want to get into it, but like they should have had that on the Switch, because you don't know who's going to get what Pokemon game in the future, you know? But regardless, I'm not that far in Alpha Sapphire. I'm trying to complete the BDSP decks, but I'll talk about that later too. Currently, I only need Entei and Raikou. Okay, I know I'm getting off topic. I'll get back on topic in a second. I just have to address something really quickly to the Pokemon fans watching this. Yes, I said I need Raikou and Entei. Yes, you might be saying, but Curfy, you don't want holes in your Pokedex. Yeah, that's right, I don't have any holes in my Pokedex except those two. Oh, right, also Ho-Oh. I forgot Ho-Oh. Some of you might be thinking like, oh, but doesn't that mean you got a Deoxys? How did you get a Deoxys if you weren't there for it? The right thing to assume is that I had a friend to trade with, and you'd be wrong. Remember how I said there's only 2 ways of getting all the Pokemon? Thousands of dollars or cheating? Well, there are some YouTubers out there that do Pokemon giveaway trades. I'm not saying these Pokemon are hacked or cheated in. It's hard to get legendaries and mythicals, okay? It's even harder to trade for them with the issue plaguing Pokemon Home, which is known as Furfru. I know who you are, ugly ass dog, Pharaoh trim, my hat. Alright, back on topic. I know there really isn't a classification for this, and it's highly debated, but personally, I consider Generation 5 to be the end of classic Pokemon. Gone are the days of link cables, strange transferring methods, and from Generation 6 and onward, we all transferred Pokemon via Wi-Fi services. I'm skipping over Generation 6 because I know the least about Generation 6. I know X and Y exist. I don't know anything further than that. But the Generation 3 remakes were the last instance of a national dex, that's all I can tell you. Technically, Sun and Moon allowed you to get every single Pokemon, but that's only via transfer, and there's no real way to register them in a Pokedex or National Dex because it doesn't exist in Alola. Game-wise, it's a little disappointing, but lore-wise, I can kind of let it slide. Alola is comprised of small islands, and it's only natural that not every species of Pokemon is native to those islands, and it's up to you, the player, if you want to bring in your Pokemon on vacation with you or not. Your help isn't needed, you know, little buddy, but you're welcome to come along with me. So what the hell's this mess? You're telling me you're going to make a region based off the country that took over the most parts of the world, like 90-something%, and you're not going to include a national dex? Like, it's so easy. You'd expect them to import some Pokemon and have them around in some capacity, but nope. One of the previous Kings of Galar said, "Oh, ban Bayleaf." Things were already a mess by the time we reached the 3DS, but at that point you only needed 2 consoles to trade every Pokemon you needed. One DS or DS Lite, and one 3DS. Here we have a scenario where only one console is needed, and yet there are still so many Pokemon locked to home hell along with my Ducklet. And you know something? When I was doing this part of the script, a little later on, I was thinking, I'm curious, are there any Pokemon that actually show up in every single generation of every single game? There are 3. Guess what they are? The Magikarp line, the Psyduck line, and the Magnemite. Well, Magnemite isn't that bad. I mean, by the time you reach Generation 4, you can make it Magnezone. But still, my point still stands. Those 3, for some reason, are the only 3 to ever survive every single generation. And that topic leads me to ribbons, but I won't talk about ribbons because that is a can of worm. That is its own can of worm. Multiple cans of worm. Barrels! All you need to know is there are over 100 ribbons, and one Pokemon can't get every single ribbon. I'll redirect you to Sir Toasty Toes if you want a more detailed explanation on what they are and how to get them, but they're in every game, and essentially it's like a title for your Pokemon. They're earned through various means, and a lot of them require you to beat the previous generations for it. However, because the Pokemon UK doesn't allow you to bring in every single Pokemon, you can't bring in your favorites. And for ribbon you poor ribbon collectors, you can't get all the ribbons you want because some of them, some poor person who had some poor dude who's had like their Pokemon since Generation 3 all the way to Generation 7, every single ribbon gets to Generation 8 and they're told, nah. What, like, come on, dude. I guarantee it was Spinda. Knowing the UK, I'm surprised the Pokemon UK didn't go on strike. Oh wait, they did. Before Generation 8 came out, Pokemon fans gathered together on social media to protest with the hashtag Bring Back the Nat Dex due to this issue, which had come to be known as Dexit. Kind of get it? It's like the British Brexit. But this is pretty much the Generation 3 issue, but on a much larger scale. In 2002, the world was locked out of 251 Pokemon if they were following the series from the beginning, but if you had been following since the GBA days up until the Switch, you were locked out of 807 Pokemon. Actually, someone check those numbers because I think I'm a little off, but you get the point. We were at like 800 something Pokemon and only 400 Pokemon showed up in the games. About 400, 600. It was weird. Also, the hate Game Freak got for not only the national dex, but also the quality of the game was so bad that people at the company were depressed. The transferring issue wasn't resolved until February 2020 with the release of Pokemon Home, where now all your Pokemon can leave their 3DS prison and now move into their bigger cells in Pokemon Home. It's essentially like moving from a prison and being transferred to Arkham Asylum. This issue even persists to the DLC of Sword and Shield. Scarlet and Violet, although glitchy, they are the biggest games in the series, both objectively in world size and also in sales. And on top of all that, expectations. But even then, we don't have every single Pokemon programmed into those games. And even if there were a way to transfer more Pokemon through the new Pokemon DLC coming out for Scarlet and Violet, I doubt every Pokemon's gonna be in it again. This is pretty much the current state of Pokemon collecting. The story people who play the game solely for the plot and the desire to become champion, the competitive people who play the game to build up a competitive team for tournaments and normal battling with friends, and then there's people like me who are Pokemon collectors who just like to have them and just, complete the national decks. So I have an idea I want to suggest, and this is the main reason why I wanted to make this video. Picture a game akin to Pokemon Stadium, Colosseum, or Battle Revolution. In a similar way to Stadium, why not have minigames? And in minigames, for me, I want them to bring back the Pokeathlon with a 3D twist. And have its own story mode, albeit not really a big one like a mainline game, maybe a more smaller one, and in this story mode you can obtain some of the Pokemon that are unobtainable in the other Switch games. Also, one advantage of this game is that you'll be able to spend time with your Pokemon, similar to how you would in a game like Hey You Pikachu. I don't know, it's just wishful thinking though. And honestly, this is my preferred solution for having a use for every single Pokemon without bringing them to a mainline game, because Game Freak seems to be opposed to it. But recently, I discovered something interesting. There's a way to get every single Pokemon from the past generations with just a 3DS that has Pokemon Transporter and Pokemon Bank, as well as a copy of Black 2. Or White 2. So, the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection service shut down back in 2014. This was a service that allowed people to play Wii games and DS games online with people. But when I got this cartridge a few months ago, I discovered that you can get every mystery gift and trade online with other people thanks to fan-operated servers, and it works on both legit carts and emulators. And I tested it out with my legit cart of Black 2, and also I used Phantom Hourglass, which was my first Zelda game that I called my own. I should make a video on that. But regardless, they work. I could play with myself on both the computer and the 3DS. It was pretty weird. So hypothetically, you can still catch them all, and apparently you can still get the emulated Pokemon to go to Pokemon Home through the 3DS. People online say as long as the Pokemon were caught legitly in the games, they're fine. There's even a whole guide that says, "Yerp, it's alright." Why'd I write that in the script? Why'd I read that from the script? Ugh. But I'm really cautious about these things, so until I see it with my own eyes, I'm not really wanting to risk a ban on Pokemon Transporter, Bank, or Home. And as for me, what I got out of this was potentially fulfilling my Pokemon dream. You see, I'm a big fan of Frostlass, really carried all my teams in every single one of the Switch games. Getting a shiny Snorunt in Generation 3, and then bringing it up to the Switch with as many ribbons as possible and evolving it into a Frostlass in Legends Arceus, that's my dream. Just a Frostlass that helps carry my whole team. I originally wanted to repair my old DS Lites to do that, but I heard fixing the hinge and the ribbon is more expensive than getting a new one, so I might do that instead. It doesn't feel right going through the games only emulated. I'd want to do it on a legit cart and eventually get to the Kalos games, because I know nothing about the Kalos games, and hopefully one day in the future I can get my hands on those. And if you want to support my Pokemon journey, there'll be a link to my Throne gifts in the description below, where you can gift me one of the Pokemon games I'm missing on the 3DS or Nintendo Switch. Also, don't forget to check out some of the creators I mentioned in this video, because without them, I probably wouldn't have been inspired to make this video. Also, check out, I don't know how to pronounce it, Giram Red, I think, who pretty much fueled my desire to make this video. If you see any of his videos, you'll know exactly why. I guess for now, I'll try my hand at Generation 3. I've heard so many good things from Generation 3 fans, but it was never really my cup of tea. I never really found it interesting or appealing at all, but, I'm willing to give it a chance now, and, hopefully I'll really enjoy it. I've enjoyed as far as I've gone. I think I'm on like my 5th badge, maybe? I think I'm on my 5th badge. I might be wrong. But yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. God bless, and I might be streaming on Twitch when this video comes out, so go give me a follow over there. Anyways,